Hello, Ambassador Das Gupta. How are you?
Hello,
Good evening, sir.
how are you?
Good evening. Good evening. And
Hi, Surender.
how are you? Nice to see you.
Surinder Padam here.
Yes. How are you, sir? How is Hyderabad doing?
Good, but as bad as Delhi.
Shyam is there, and I think Ram Madhavji also there.
Yeah,
His
good.
video is not on. Okay.
Yes, sir.
still
I am also
Hello.
here.
Good
Thank
evening,
you.
sir. Ram Madhavji. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Good evening.
I assure you, we will finish before the lockdown starts.
Is the lockdown on really?
Well,
Midnight.
Hi, Shyam.
I think it starts at midnight.
Yeah.
No, 10 o'clock, 10 p.m.
10
Oh, is
p.m.
it? Okay.
10 p.m. from tonight and then next Monday. So it's a long period. And let me see, we have other friends coming here.
Good evening, Ajay Shankar here. Good evening, Ajay Shankar here.
Hi,
How
Ajay.
are you? Yes, Ajay, I have seen you. Where is the better house? Hello, Dr. Sam Pittoda. How are you from Chicago? Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Shall I come for a while?
Nice
morning,
to see you
Mr.
after a long
Pittoda.
time.
I know. I thought this
Sit
was
down
very
there.
join. Thank you for thinking of me.
Yes, I see General Deepak Kapoor is somewhere.
Yes,
General, are you
Ambassador
there?
Kumar, I'm here, just coming on.
Okay, General, good evening.
Hello.
General Deepak Kapoor, yes, I can see you now.
Good evening to you, Ambassador Kumar.
Good evening, good evening.
How have you been, Mr. Kumar?
I'm fine, I'm fine. How is Anuji?
She's good.
Okay, so good evening. I think we'll begin as our usual Indian friends will keep on joining and our, I'm sure our attendance will increase by the time we are 10 minutes in the program. So I thank all our distinguished panelists who have come on board in spite of so many pressing preoccupations and also in very difficult times. And I am also very grateful to our friend from outside India, Dr. Pittoda from Chicago. We have Dennis Jogan from Chicago University. We have Puneet Chapra from New York. And we have our former Home Secretary, Padmavya sir from Hyderabad. So for a change, we are discussing not foreign affairs, but climate change, which is one of the two biggest crises which the world has faced since World War II. Other being COVID-19 pandemic, which has taken more than 3 million lives, devastated economies, disrupted our normal life, made millions jobless, and shows no signs of an end in spite of all the vaccination drive all over the world. On the other hand, unprecedented frequency and intensity of the hurricanes, cyclones, storms, long spells of snowing, deep drop in temperature, floods in countries which had never seen floods, cloudbursts, and heat waves all flag to the crisis of climate change, which cannot be ignored only at our own peril. What a huge difference 100 days can make in the life of a nation and the world at large. Till 19th January 2021, the US was not even part of the global discourse on climate change, thanks to the previous President Donald Trump. His successor, Joe Biden, joined the Paris Agreement within hours of being sworn as the president. He hasn't lost any time in assuming the global leadership, has called the first virtual summit of 40 leaders to discuss climate change on 2nd, 22nd, 23rd of April, and sent out his special envoy, John Kerry, globetrotting, urging his interlocutors to announce ambitious target to net zero by 2050. Biden's efforts should be applauded. His pledge to pay back America's arrears to climate fund should be welcome. However, the arguments of his climate change envoy, John Kerry, who visited India and China this month, sound simplistic and lopsided. His narrative runs like this: atmosphere is impacted by the total amount of emission. It doesn't distinguish between emission from developed countries or the developing countries, nor does it matter to it which country had contributed maximum in the past. So all countries must commit net zero by 2050, or we won't succeed in ensuring the temperature doesn't rise beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade. His prescription seems neither fair nor practical. When we intend to reduce the total global emission, countries which emitted more have to reduce more and in a much shorter period. Minister of Environment Javadekar put it bluntly, we can't just forget. We will not allow anybody to forget it. Historical emissions responsibility today is of China 28%, USA 40%, Europe 10%, and India is only 3%. We are not responsible for climate change that is happening. In 2018, with total emission of 10.6 GT, China accounted for 30% of global emission. USA with 5.41 GT accounted for 10%. In India with 2.6 GT accounted for 7%. However, with 17 tons, Australia topped the list of per capita footprint, followed by USA with 16.2 tons, Canada for 15.6 tons, India with per capita emission of just 1.8 tons, which is one of the lowest in the world. By committing to net zero by 2050 now means India can't go beyond her emission level of 2019. Will that not put India's Make in India and Atmanirbhar programs in jeopardy? Experts on the panel might comment if these apprehensions are unfounded. Indian experts differ on what India should do. Jan Sinha has advised that we must announce bold targets which will earn us diplomatic brownie points and attract investment, which will generate many jobs. It's obviously high on hopes. Professor Navroz Dovas, a professor at the CPR, suggests a different route. We may announce that we are for net zero 2050 as a long-term aspirational goal, but we will focus on meeting our commitment as per Paris Agreement, which relies on common but differentiated responsibility and achieve our ambitious target of 450 gigawatt energy from renewable sources by 2030. He recommends we ourselves set sector-wise emission reduction target. We produce increasingly more with less emission. Ambassador Chandrasekhar Das Gupta, he may correct me if I am wrong, is not too different from Navroz. India has succeeded reducing emission intensity of GDP to 24% by 2016, so should be able to meet the target of 30% reduction by 2030. And the share of non-fossil fuel-based installed capacity of energy generation in India has reached 38.5%, thus 2030 targets should be achievable. But for reaching these goals, flow of finances and technology from developed world is a must. In this regard, Kerry doesn't have much to offer, except high-sounding ideas, aspirations, hopes of good deliverance. Minister of Environment Javadekar asks, where is the money? There is no money in sight. You have polluted, destroyed the world, and brought climate change. Now you are saying don't use coal. The alternative technology has to be cheaper than coal. Only then people will do away with coal. They should make technology at an affordable cost. Climate change is not a business. When 120 countries have announced targets, we can't afford to be the fall guy. We have to use our entire diplomatic finesse to be climate change leader and not a spoiler, but also safeguard our economic development and save the livelihood of millions of Indians. I'm sure our learned panelists will show the path. Hope you will find this discussion interesting as well as thought-provoking. Let me remind our distinguished panelists again, as I have written in my email quite a few times, all of you have just 10 minutes to argue or your views. 10 minutes mean 10 minutes. I have nobody else to alert you. Keep your smartphone next to you, and when your 10 minutes are over, please make way for the next person. Thank you very much for coming. Now I first of all invite Sri Ram Madhavji. He has written on this subject quite a lot. He has attended many of the meetings. He needs no introduction. You see him on television, you read his articles. I will just say a few lines only. He was National General Secretary of BJP. He was National Spokesman for RSS for 11 years. He has written more than 12 books, and his book on China called The Uneasy Neighbors, India, China After 50 Years of War has been widely talked about. He serves as a member of the Board of Governors of India Foundation and is a mentor of Vision India Foundation, India-based, Delhi-based think tank working on public leadership amongst youth. Sir, you have heard what John Kerry said here. He met Prime Minister, he met Finance Minister, he met Trade Minister, he met Environment Minister, and also I put it for our Minister. So going by the statement, there's a huge gulf between the US stand, our stand. So what, according to, is going to be India's strategy? And what do you expect from the virtual summit in 22nd, 23rd April? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador Kumar. I'm not an expert on this topic, but I will probably not take more than 5-6 minutes to give my opinion, my views on this very important topic. Firstly, as far as Mr. Kerry's visit is concerned, I would also like to attract your attention of all the August participants to the visit of Al Gore in 2015. If you recall the reaction of the Indian leadership at that time, it was also almost on the similar lines. The reaction happens because of certain discomfort with America coming and trying to put pressure on India. I have one very humble submission to make. Because of that specific country engagement, we probably say a few things like, nobody can pressurize us, etc., etc. And then we tend to talk about historic emissions, etc. I'm afraid we should now get out of that whole syndrome. Talking about historic emissions and trying to put the blame on, developed West for all the evils is fine as an argument. Also, to talk about per capita emissions is also a very convenient way of putting across a very innocent face. We must remember that we should look to the future now. Looking towards the future, the argument should be, or the approach should be that yes, of course, America, whether it has the right and the authority to tell us what we should or should not do, that's a different debate. But it also is very important that we should do our best to address this global challenge, rising above these, political points, etc. Why I'm saying this was that when Al Gore came, the reaction from some of our very senior Indian leaders was that you don't teach us, we will only try to address this issue after 150 years. Now, coming from a very senior person, that certainly sounds for people like me as not a very expected or responsible statement. But these are reactions to the country which probably is not doing enough and telling the entire world that you do more. Coming to the specific issue of it, I think Prime Minister Modi is doing a great job, right from the creation of International Solar Alliance in 2015 to the kind of targets that we just now talked about in renewable energy. We are doing a fantastic job of reducing emissions, or probably taking our responsibility seriously. We, of course, net zero emissions, I do not know what will happen about it and when can we really reach that stage. But definitely the targets that we have set for ourselves are very ambitious, like a country, for a country like India with its population, like, you mentioned about 465 gigawatt renewable energy by 2030. That's the target that Prime Minister has set for India. It is certainly a very ambitious target and we are working towards it. Already we have crossed many important milestones. So I think India is on the right path, irrespective of what, sometimes we say publicly, political expressions, etc. apart. As a global challenge, looking at it as a global challenge, I would like to mention that the most important link in this whole process is the International Solar Alliance. Obviously, we were the main country for pushing for the creation of that alliance, and we
Yes. I think his audio is gone. Ramanand, I think your audio is off.
ambition.
Yes. Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Although it is doing a lot of ambitious work, it has challenges in terms of technology. We are not getting enough support in terms of technology from those countries which have technology with them or the resources with them. Some of these challenges can be addressed by International Solar Alliance or bodies like that, UN climate change bodies like that. But in that, nothing, not enough support is coming from these so-called champions today who are coming and telling us what we should or should not do. That is, I think, an important challenge that we are facing. As far as India is concerned, it has to set one or two of its priorities right. Number one, of course, as far as the targets of renewable energy production and reduction of fossil fuel consumption is concerned, we are on the right track. We have imposed more taxes on coal and other fossil fuel consumption.
Yes, I think your audio is having some problems. Can you get back, Ramadhavji?
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, last point that I'm trying to make is that India has to set its priorities a little bit right, because we are focusing more on energy generation. We are not focusing enough on developing required technologies, especially deep tech. We are not doing enough in that, so we will eventually end up depending on the developed world or maybe even countries like China for most of the technologies required to maintain our target, manage our targets. So, for example, solar panels we don't manufacture, batteries we don't manufacture. We are talking about creating 450 gigawatt of renewable energy. Then we finally have to turn to a hybrid hydro, renewable hydro type of hybrid efforts and all that. So I think priority wise, India has to also focus more on technology side. In that, India and US can together work, do a lot of things. I hope that will be the future trajectory for our two countries as far as the climate change related challenges are concerned. I will end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ram Madhavji. You have spoken more like a diplomat than a politician. I wish you had joined our foreign service. Now let me move to my friend Ajay Shankar, who's sitting in Terry. And Terry has been working on this field for decades. I have had the honor of receiving and hosting Dr. R.K. Pachauri several times in Nairobi when I was High Commission PR to UNEP and he used to come lead delegation. I've also had the honor of meeting Ambassador Chandrika Das Gupta and Dr. P.K. Ghosh. So Ajay, you have heard Ram Madhavji, you have also heard whatever I quoted from the Environment Minister. What is your take? How do we proceed and what are your expectations from the forthcoming virtual summit?
Let me begin by thanking you for giving me the privilege of being here today. Two initial, I think, observations or caveats. One is that whatever I would be saying would be my views and not the views of Terry.
Okay.
The second is that since 2019, I've been publicly arguing that India should have the ambition of becoming net carbon zero by 2047, the 100th year of our independence. This is doable, this is affordable, and it will add to India's competitive advantage. I've written a series of pieces.
You don't like the round for 50, 60, 70, 47?
100 years of our independence. We should celebrate by being a global leader. Now, coming to the present context, climate change is described by some activists as the iceberg which mankind sitting on the Titanic is now already beginning to graze. And the extreme weather events that you talked about are a symbol of that. The science is pretty robust on this, that this is the biggest danger before mankind. And because of the consensus in the science, global public opinion has been moving very rapidly. So President Biden, as a candidate, made this one of his key planks in his campaign. And he has won, and he has been consistent in saying that this is one of his 4 key priorities. And therefore, for those who want success on climate change, I think this is very good news that the US under Biden is prepared to assume leadership, is trying to assume leadership, and is trying to get all the countries of the world together in meeting this difficult challenge. So, notwithstanding, media reports of US's relative decline, the fact of the matter is that it is the preeminent global power technologically, financially, etc., etc. So it's being under the tent and leading the struggle against climate change is one of the best things that has happened to the global challenge of climate change. Now, if one looks at the future, then the last 10 years, technology has moved at a speed which is amazing and dizzying. So I'll just give 2 numbers. When we launched our national solar mission, Ambassador Shyam Saran would recall that the price of solar power fixed by a central regulatory commission was 17 rupees and 16 rupees. And the modest target of 20,000 megawatts by this year seemed unattainable and unaffordable. We have surprised ourselves, we have surprised the world by having reached 40 in terms of solar, 40,000 megawatts. The Prime Minister has raised the goal to 170,000 megawatts and now 450,000 megawatts. And today, all of it seems doable and achievable. The prices we have got in solar power in our bids are as low as 2.5 rupees, 3 rupees, starting from 16, 17 rupees. If we look at storage, the price was in 2013 globally was $800 a kilowatt hour. It is down to $100 a kilowatt hour. We invited bids last year for renewable plus storage, or CK did it. And we got prices or bid prices, which were lower than a new thermal power project. 4 rupees something compared to 6 rupees for a new thermal power project. So I think we need to take into account the amazing developments in technology that have already happened. And given global partnerships and global leadership, I think what can happen in the coming years would be even better. So the target of net carbon zero is not as difficult and as daunting as it appeared 3-4 years back. So if we look at just pure technology, the technology for fossil fuel free electricity is there. California has a law saying 2045. They will achieve it. Biden in his campaign said 2035. And none of them are looking at achieving this by imposing huge costs on the consumer. Denmark today is building an artificial island for wind power, which will generate as much electricity as it is generating today and costs which are affordable. Germany, with little sunshine, has already 46% of renewable energy. UK is crossing 30%. Last year, Norway sold more electric cars than normal cars. UK is taking a decision that by 2030, they will not permit sale of fossil fuel cars. So the world is changing very rapidly, and I am very optimistic that the global partnerships that would emerge would take mankind towards a fossil fuel economy. Now, as far as India is concerned, the 450,000 megawatt target, which the PM has already announced, is doable, it is achievable, it is affordable, and whatever we have achieved with solar power is the result of private investment and private money, and it hasn't imposed additional costs on our consumers. In fact, there is a TERI study which says that if you take renewables up to 40%, there is no additional cost to the system as a whole. Our power sector has huge problems, but they're not the result of rising share of renewables. Now, if you look at the transport sector, Even today, if the charging infrastructure is in place, electric vehicles are commercially better for users than normal vehicles. So a surface transport economy, which is completely free of fossil fuels, backed by electricity, which is free of fossil fuels, is a technologically feasible reality which can be attained in the not too distant future and without imposing additional costs, in my view, saving costs for the economy. Now we come to the slightly tougher parts. Complete storage for all the needs, it's a challenge globally, but I'm sure we can succeed. And then we have the tougher bits of the industrial sector where the technological challenges still survive, but experts are very confident that within this decade, those challenges would be overcome and we could run a modern industrial manufacturing economy without the use of fossil fuels. So I am an optimist. I think India will work with the rest of the world in saving mankind from the disaster that is awaiting it from climate change. And we should welcome Biden's leadership and coming under the tent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajay. Congratulations for your optimism. I didn't introduce you. You are secretary, former secretary, DIPP. You are on so many board of governors and you write very extensively. Nobody denies technology is there. You put it all the country, Denmark, Norway, California, other places. Fact is, this technology is available free, is affordable. Where is the money? John Kerry has said last month or before that he can request certain countries to offer India $600 billion. The $600 billion figure looks very important, but where is the money? In his interview with India Today, Raj Chingappa, he said there is no money. There is no money. We will only see how money will come. We also talk about research. India and US can do joint research and really come up with some technology. So I'm sure some other panelists will come, sort of comment on that. Now I turn to Ambassador Chandrasekhar Gupta. He has been ambassador to China, but he has been well-known climate change negotiator for more than 10, 15 years. He writes very extensively. Actually, some of things which I have quoted here, there are from his articles from Hindustan Times. Over to you, sir. Your audio is off, sir. Audio. The audio. There is little red kind of this old style micro in your front. Just you press it, it will turn. Yes, now fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I feel privileged to share this platform with such distinguished participants. Now, I think President Biden's decision to return to the Paris Agreement does open up vast new possibilities for Indo-US cooperation, but it also revives old challenges for India. Let us not forget that the United States continues to reject the idea of climate justice, equity, as reflected in the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. And this results in shifting an unfair burden on the shoulders of developing countries. Developing countries should, of course, do everything they can, that is for climate mitigation, provided it is consistent with the economic and social development programs and their programs of poverty alleviation. So here is a problem that we cannot overlook in the ongoing negotiations with the United States. Now, I think in order to understand the implications of the Biden initiative, it is essential to look at the domestic factors that shape US climate policy. And here we see two contradictory trends. On the one hand, more than any other country, the United States possesses the technological and financial resources required for the transition to clean energies. And for this reason, many influential US business leaders are pressing for an early transition to clean energy because this would open up vast new markets for innovative US technologies. But at the same time, the United States also possesses bountiful hydrocarbon resources, oil, coal and natural gas. Now, this blessing or curse, depending upon your point of view, also generates very powerful political lobbies that militate against climate action. The oil and coal industries are represented by very powerful conservative lobbies. Now, as a result of these conflicting pressures, there is a deep division in the United States between states whose economies are dominated by the high-tech sector and those states which continue to rely on exploitation of oil and coal resources. The net result is a slew of inconsistent measures resulting from these opposing pulls. So even when there is a climate skeptic administration in Washington, as we had till recently under President Trump, California and the northeastern states took many important climate change initiatives. And conversely, even when there is a climate-friendly president like Obama, he found it impossible to enact ambitious climate change legislation because of opposition in Congress. He was unable to muster the required majority in Congress, and he had to fall back upon the limited possibilities offered by executive actions. Now it remains to be seen whether President Biden will be able to steer any ambitious climate change legislation through Congress. And even in the field of executive actions, he's likely to face legal challenges from individual states. So the point to note is that US climate policy is driven by hard economic calculations, not by environmental altruism. In 1997, when Vice President Al Gore steered the adoption of the equity-based Kyoto Protocol in the international community, he found himself facing an insurmountable wall of opposition in Congress, not only from the Republicans, but from his own party, the Democrats. And John Kerry, the current presidential special envoy on climate change, was among those who condemned the Kyoto Protocol, an argument based squarely on equity and the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. Because of strong congressional opposition, the United States failed to ratify the Kyoto Protocol and in effect walked out from an agreement negotiated by its own vice president. So we must remember that climate justice and equity, as enshrined in the principle of common but differentiated responsibility, has no place in US environmental policy. I want to make it clear that when I say this, I'm not pointing a finger at the United States. After all, it is in the nature of international relations that states pursue their own national interests as they see it. I'm emphasizing this obvious point only because many environmental activists have quite unrealistic expectations about the role of altruism in climate negotiations. So what positions should we take in the new climate forum that has been convened by President Biden? First, we should highlight our own achievements in the renewable energy sector and the impressive progress that we have made in reaching our nationally determined contributions for 2030. Even if we are considering an enhanced contribution, and let me make it clear, I do not support the idea of climate neutrality for India by 2050 as a global objective, yes. I think it would be a tactical blunder to announce any enhanced contribution so far ahead of the Edinburgh Climate Summit, which is scheduled at the end of the year. It would be a tactical error because it would steal our thunder from COP26 and would only lead to suggestions in coming months for further enhancement of our targets. Second, we should invite the United States and all other participants who have not already done so to join the International Solar Alliance. It will be recalled that in 2015, India and France jointly took the initiative of establishing the International Solar Alliance. Membership was originally restricted to tropical countries, but because of expressions of interest from many other countries, this January membership was opened up to all countries. And since then, we've had several advanced countries, such as Japan, UK, Italy, and Germany, that have already become members or are in the process of becoming members. The United States and also China have so far shown no interest. I think we should invite the United States in particular to join the ISA because it can make a very important contribution to the transition to renewable energies through its participation in this forum. Thirdly, while recognizing the opportunities for Indo-US cooperation in the transition to clean energy, we should also be aware that there are inherent conflicts between US commercial interests and our Atmanirbhar Bharat policy. We should recall that the United States raised strong objections when we took very modest steps to encourage domestic production of solar cells and panels. We were taken to the WTO. We should be especially wary of enhancing spectacular net zero or peaking targets that would have the effect of compelling us to import new technologies before they become affordable to developing countries through economies of scale or indigenous manufacture. We must reject offers of a brief hour of glory that will lead eventually to decades of disaster. Fourth, we should take note of the new feature of associating business leaders and NGOs with the forum. This has positive potential, but also we should be on our guard against attempts to formulate common industry-wide emission standards or best practices without regard to the level of development or national circumstances of individual countries. Standards appropriate to technologically advanced high-income countries may not be applicable to other countries. Standards and best practices must take into account the level of development of an individual country. And finally, we need to keep a close watch on US-China interaction in the sphere of climate change. In the first decade of the climate negotiations, India and China cooperated closely with each other and with other developing countries. China's rapid economic development in the last 2 decades led to a corresponding rise in its influence in the climate negotiations. And China began to coordinate positions with the United States, though it must be said that it did not break ranks with the developing countries. The Paris Agreement of 2015 was largely shaped by the US and Chinese negotiators, John Kerry and Xie Zhenhua. Now, with the return of the United States to the Paris Agreement, both US and China have indicated an interest in reviving their mutual cooperation, insulating it from their profound geopolitical rivalry. After his meeting with Kerry in Shanghai last week, Vice Premier Han Zheng declared that China and the United States, as the world's largest developing and developed country, share many common interests in tackling climate change. At the same time, he also emphasized the importance of the common but differentiated responsibility principle. Now, in order to maximize our leverage in the climate negotiations, we should continue to remain in touch with both US and China. Like the United States, we have de-linked to the extent possible our deep political differences with China from the climate negotiations. I say we have already done so because earlier this month, the basic group of countries, China, Brazil, South Africa, and India, issued a joint statement opposing the EU proposal to introduce common border levies. And the statement upheld the vitally important principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities. To sum up then, we should actively explore every opportunity for advancing Indo-US cooperation, but we should not lower our guard against US attempts to undermine the principle of equity in climate negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your very strong and unambiguous views. And you have not lost your thunder. So now I turn to my friend Shyam Saran. Now he is the only person. Ambassador Shyam Saran need no introduction. He has been Foreign Secretary. He is Special Envoy, Prime Minister of Climate Change. He was Chairman of National Security Advisory Board, Chairman of RIS, and he has worn so many hats. I don't know how does he not feel overburdened. Shyam, you have heard everybody. You are the only person who had actually dealt with John Kerry when you were Secretary of State. So you have had personal experience dealing with him, and you have already heard what he has said. I had flagged one or two points when China, in joint statement, China has not given anything. It says we are ready for meeting net zero 2060. And they also say we will commit by Paris Agreement. Now, these two positions should not be opposed by us because they suit us fine, isn't it? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Surinder, for giving me this opportunity to share my views on this very important issue of climate change. I don't intend to repeat many of the points that have been so ably made by the previous speakers, particularly Ambassador Chandrasekhar Das Gupta. Had the privilege of, being in the negotiations in Copenhagen, where he also very much participated in those final negotiations which led to the Copenhagen Accord. So we have had, quite a lot of experience dealing with the issue of climate change in multilateral setting. Let me therefore begin by perhaps taking us back to some what I call fundamental truths. One is that, yes, we should focus very much on whatever India can do to be ambitious, to be bold, because it is so patently in our own interest that we should be taking bold action on climate change. So I have no quarrel with that. But precisely because climate change is a global issue, precisely because it is an issue where what I do as a country has only a limited impact on what happens globally. So our emissions today, we are the third largest emitter, but our emissions are about 6 to 7% of the global total. So even if we manage to go to zero, climate change is not going to stop. Climate change will continue to impact on us. So while we focus on doing very bold and ambitious things, we will still need to be engaged globally in negotiations to make sure that whatever we are doing is not something which is just a waste of money and a waste of time. So this is very important. I think we sometimes forget that there is a very strong link between those two things. So while we do whatever we can within the limitation of our resources, we have to work very hard to ensure that we contribute to a global climate change regime which is enhancing our developmental prospects, not limiting our developmental prospects. This is fundamental. So this is one point that I would like to make, that we sometimes, we just talk about, oh, should we not be ambitious? Should we not do big things? Isn't there today's world allowing us to do big things? Of course. Let us do all the big things that we can. But let us not forget, even if we do all the big things we can, it may not make one bit of a difference with regard to global climate change unless other major countries are also working together to do the same thing. So that's one point. Second is, somehow or the other in India itself, it appears that, we are taking rather unreasonable positions, that we are putting forward, demands which are, perhaps not so realistic, forgetting that all that we are insisting upon, in terms of, for example, common but differentiated responsibility, or that there is a responsibility on the part of the countries which have capital, which have technology, and which have a certain historical responsibility. All what is required of them to do is not because India is demanding. It is what they have committed themselves to in the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So this should be clearly understood. Somehow it has become, oh, India is making all these demands. No, India is not making those demands. All that India has been saying consistently for the last so many years is, please deliver on the commitments, legal commitments that you have made, and that is enough for us. We are not asking you to do any more. Now, the other third point I would like to make is that it is for very good reason that the climate change negotiations, the regime has 4 building blocks. And all those 4 building blocks are completely, linked to one another. So you have mitigation, you have adaptation, you have finance, you have technology. Each one of them is an indispensable component of any climate change regime. You can't just focus attention on mitigation and say, let us forget about, adaptation for the time being, or, finance, what can we do? There is not enough money available, only private capital is available. Or technology, you see, all this is proprietary technology. How can we force, those who have these technology to transfer it to you? These arguments have been coming up much later. There was no controversy about this when these international legal instruments were negotiated. So what we have today is a kind of a singular focus only on mitigation. And I'm not for a moment saying that mitigation is not important. Of course, we have to move away from fossil fuel based energy to non-fossil fuel based energy. No doubt about it. That is fundamental. But you see, for countries like India, many large, developing countries, the big challenge we are already confronting is adaptation. Because climate change is taking place already. It's not something happening in the future. It is happening today. And it is imposing huge costs on us. So quite in addition to the cost of having to transition from fossil fuel based economy to a non-fossil fuel based economy, it is not costless, although some people may think so. It involves deployment of large resources. At the same time, we are also having to bear costs of adaptation to climate change. And by the way, this burden on us is going to keep on increasing even more as we go forward, as the ravages of climate change become even worse than what they are today. So I think these components get missed out somehow because, from the point of view of the West, from the United States, everything is focused on mitigation. I'm not saying mitigation is not important, but it is for the developing countries, there has to be attention given to these other aspects. Now, finance, you have seen, there is no money coming. And Kerry made it very clear that there is no money. Okay, so even if you are saying, oh, we can get together, some countries together to assist India, where do you expect that money to come from? Secondly, even what they have committed themselves. So I'm looking at the record of the last several years on the delivery on the commitment for $100 billion per year to developing countries. Now they claim, and Kerry made that point, oh, it's about 80 billion or so per year. That is absolute lie. There is no other way to describe it. Because you take in everything, philanthropic money that is coming in for some purpose, you bring in, money which is coming from private capital, you bring in, assistance which was being given under other programs from multilateral institutions, you lump it all together and then you say it is $80 billion. It simply does not conform to what originally was the idea about finance being transferred to developing countries to enable climate change action by them. So that is the first point. Our own Ministry of Finance has estimated that the actual amount, the largest amount in any 1 year was only $11 billion. So if that is more or less accurate, then you compare it to the $100 billion which was supposed to come. Technology, of course, no technology has come because it is all supposed to be proprietary. Now you can solve the proprietary problem very easily, and which is what we had suggested at the negotiation, that why doesn't the United Nations in fact buy or lease proprietary technologies for whatever the cost, so the inventor does not suffer, the innovator does not suffer, and then you make it available in a graduated manner to the countries which require it. The richest countries pay the whatever is the rate, but the developing countries, low-income countries, should be not asked to pay too much. So it can be resolved, but they don't want to do this because it is, as Ambassador Dasgupta said, there is a huge commercial opportunity which is being seen. So while we look at this question, I think we should be clear-headed about this. I finally would like to address the point about what Ambassador Dasgupta said. It is critical to see what is going to happen between the US and China. Now, the US point is this is a standalone global issue on which we should cooperate. The very next day, there is an official statement from the official spokesman saying there cannot be a standalone. You cannot say that, let us work together on climate change, but I will keep fighting you on other things. That is not acceptable to China. Now, if that is the position, then I cannot see how this is going to, result in the cooperation between the largest emitter and the second largest emitter. Unless this is only for propaganda, which I don't think it is. Basically, China is saying and using its leverage, I'm the largest emitter in the world, you can't do anything without me. So if you think that something has to be done on climate change between you and me, you have to make concessions on other issues. It is as clear as that. Now, will the US say chicken and go along? That remains to be seen. Now, it is not very clear, for example, whether Xi Jinping is going to actually attend the summit, which is going to take place in a couple of days. He has kept everybody guessing. The latest report I see is that there is also anger because of that delegation which went to Taiwan recently. And also there are reports that the Congress may be looking at some new legislation for support to Taiwan. It is just possible that given that the sensitivity of that issue, maybe they may not. Maybe Xi Jinping will show his displeasure by not, going to the summit. And the other indication is that he had a private summit himself with the Macron and Merkel on the climate issue. So was he signaling that I'm prepared to work together with you, but not to the US? One doesn't know, but we will wait and see. So I would like to stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. I think we have very, very stimulating discussion so far. And we have about 15-20 minutes for question answer session. Dr. Pitroda, you have been listening very patiently for an hour, and you have been in thick of many, many meetings. I am sure when President Obama came first time here, you were briefing him on some programs. Would you like to ask a question or make some comments, Dr. Pitroda?
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm delighted to be a part of this group. I'm here more to listen and learn. My main concern is our own emphasis on indigenous technology. I think we talk all these great games, but in reality, we don't have much on next generation batteries, as well as on solar panel production. To me, these are the two key areas looking at more from the viewpoint of technology. We should be the leader in these two, period. Let everybody else worry about all the other stuff. There is no reason for India to take number 2 position on battery research and on solar panel production. That has to be the key focus. While everything else is going on, I heard everybody, I think these are very important points. But we have nothing except big market today. People look at India as a big market, that's all. So I think it is unreasonable for us to expect that we'll get respect in this debate because we have nothing. So can we go to the table with some strength? And I think that strategy is missing from my viewpoint. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Padmavaya sir, would you like to say something?
No, not really. Thank you.
Okay. Now I see a hand going up, my friend Suresh Goyal. Shoot, Suresh Goyal. Whom do you want to ask a question?
Thank you, Surinder. No, I'm speaking not as an expert on the climate-related issues or renewable energy. And I completely agree with Mr. Pitroda that our two really important issues are technology and the solar panels. And unless we have our own technology, unless we are leaders, we are talking in thin air really. Now, my comment or question really is addressed to the two gurus present here on the panel, Ambassador Das Gupta and Ambassador Shyam Saran. My sense is that we don't seem to have got much out of either Kyoto Accord or from the Paris Accords, either in terms of transfer of technology or financing or anything. We have taken initiatives in our own interest and we have succeeded in some, we have not succeeded in some. My issue really is that today we see, as we have seen in the past, that the Western countries, and now including China, basically getting together because of their own interests and getting together in the interest of their own objectives and doing things together. You have this statement coming from John Kerry, denied the next day by the official spokesman. Should we not then adopt our own path, develop our own technology, develop our own resources, and go it really without expecting much or without even trying to think that we will get anything at all from the international community?
Okay, Suresh, I think we got the gist.
I have finished. Thank you very much, Surinder.
Okay, so Ambassador Das Gupta, then Shyam, Ram Madhav, you want to say something? Suresh is showing we should have our own technology. Even in my article, I said, look, we had once developed our own supercomputer when US had reviewed to do it. On the vaccine, we have developed our own. So why should not we concentrate having all the technology for climate control also?
Surinder, I'm going a step beyond that. I'm saying, where is the point in us sticking to either Kyoto or Paris Accord when we are not getting anything out of this?
Okay, thank you. Let the panelists comment now. Ram Madhav, you go first, then I ask Ambassador Das Gupta.
Ambassador Kumar, can I come in?
Yeah, please.
As I said in my initial brief comments, technology should be the priority for India. While I appreciate all other the valid points made by all other panelists, for whatever reason, we are really moving very fast on the renewable energy area in this particular renewable energy generation area. But in India, we do not have technology either, as pointed out, either for solar panel manufacturing or for storage. The first solar park has still not been commissioned. Now we are talking about 450 gigawatt solar energy production, etc., etc. How do you save it? And 60% of the battery storage is being manufactured today by China. So we will end up importing it from China. What really worries me is when I raised this issue with a very important person in the system, his reply to us was very perplexing. He said, we should not look for battery storage because, batteries can be only recycled thrice. Then the battery waste will become a nuisance after 15, 20 years. Now, we are so forward looking, 15, 20 years ahead we are looking, and we don't know how to run our entire transport system if you don't have batteries. So there was just mention about transport as an important component. So somehow on priorities, we are not really thinking seriously. We are thinking about where is the money, etc., etc. But then where we can really focus on, there is definite laxity in India. We have to seriously address that issue. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Das Gupta.
If I understood Ambassador Goel's question, it is that we have had very modest pickings from our adhesion to the Paris Agreement and other climate change agreements. Very modest sort of results in terms of technology transfer and finance. And therefore, is it worth our while to stay in these agreements? I agree entirely with him that the net results have been exceedingly modest. At the same time, I do not feel that that we should pull out of international agreements to which the vast majority of member states have in the international community are parties. For reasons of optics, if nothing else, this would hardly be an advisable course of action. So I feel even though the pickings are modest so far, we should stay in and try and ensure that in future they are less modest than they have been in the past.
Ajay, you have heard a lot about these solar panels and storage of batteries, etc. You have done a lot, you have written about them. Can you come in?
I think the course correction that we need is to move in the direction of Atmanirbhar Bharat. In the PLI scheme, there is both batteries and solar panels. We need to be far more ambitious and aggressive. In fact, I would go further and say that we should pick up the threads from 2010 in the initial stages and say that our procurement would be where 70% value addition takes place in India, whether it is batteries or solar panels, and take it to 80, 90%. The additional cost we'll have to pay maybe 20, 30% more. We can afford it because once we have domestic manufacturing, costs come down. We are, I think, the most efficient vaccine manufacturers in the world. We are the most efficient manufacturers of pharmaceuticals in the world. If we get our government policy right, there is no reason why we will not be the most efficient battery manufacturers or the solar panel manufacturers in the world.
Last word from
that
you,
has not
Shyam.
been our objective as yet. Let us make it the objective. We will succeed in 5 years.
Shyam, over to you. Your audio is not audio. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Just to reinforce the point which was made by Ambassador Das Gupta, of course, we must stay engaged with the multilateral process. because perhaps that is the only way in which we can try and in fact get the other partners to deliver on their commitments. Because the good news is that they are they are still part of that legal instrument. So you have a good case if you were able to put that case across. We keep hearing all the time rule-based order, rule-based order. What about some rule-based order on the climate front? This is not a domain where there is no rule-based order. There is a rule-based order, but the problem is that people are not delivering on the rules that they are supposed to observe. So I think we should remain committed. And lastly, I would also like to just mention here that when we did the solar mission, if you go back to the solar mission document, actually there is a technical annex, which in fact spells out what we need to do to precisely develop local indigenous capability, both on solar panels as well as on battery storage. In fact, there was something like 5 projects which were to be bid out to IITs, or IITs could collaborate together. There was chemical storage, there was other kind of storage. But as it usually happens, we went ahead with the first part, but the less glamorous and more hard work part, which was the solar mission and technological pathway, that just fell by the wayside. So it's not that that issue was not addressed, but we just did not implement it.
Well, we have a few minutes, as I said, 2 minutes to each of you for your final comment. Concentrate only the forthcoming virtual summit. What do you expect of it? Ajay, you go first. 2 minutes. Final outcome of the forthcoming virtual summit, 22nd, 23rd April.
A global consensus that we will work together to achieve net carbon zero as soon as possible, because that is what mankind needs.
Das Gupta, sir.
An American attempt, a major American initiative to reassert claims to leadership in global climate response, but which will face challenges most likely from China, perhaps Russia, and let's see what positions other countries take.
Ram Madhavji, what do you expect from virtual summit on 22nd, 23rd?
I would like India to focus on strengthening the International Solar Alliance. It's our own baby. It's in a very, very precarious condition. I don't know how many of us are aware that it has hardly 40, 45 staff members today, no money to run their research, no money for anything. First of all, there are a lot of commitments. Many countries have committed money, these many million euros, these many $1 million, but nobody has really paid up. India should focus on strengthening International Solar Alliance. Through that, probably we can help in developing technologies and help lots of developing countries in the world in the climate issues. Thank you.
Shyam, you have the last word.
Yeah, well, I do expect that there would be a huge amount of pressure to get everyone to sign on to net carbon zero by 2050. But our effort should be, as has been pointed out earlier, that it should figure as a global target. And it should be according to the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. Different countries should be, committed to contributing as much as they can to the achievement of this target. But I don't think that we should declare an INDC, an Indian NDC of carbon neutrality by 2050. That is, I'm not in favor of.
Thank you very much. We must applaud all the panelists virtually. I think one of the most meaningful and stimulating discussion COVID times. I thank all my panelists and I thank all those friends who have joined from different places. Dr. Pitoda, please convey my regard to Anuji. And Puneet, you are all right in New York, and Dennis in Chicago, and all the attendees from India who have come here. Ram Madhavji, Shyam, Chandrasekhar Das Gupta ji, thank you very much for coming on board. And
thank you.
Thank you.
And we have finished before lockdown. We have finished before lockdown. Okay.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Thank
night.
you. Thank you.
Bye.